Welcome everyone back to my channel. If this is your first time here, my name is Monica. I'm a tarot reader and astrologer based in Australia. And today I'm finally getting around to doing a video response to Kay at Amidst the Grey on her hashtag Coffee House decks. I thought it was a fantastic hashtag. I really enjoyed watching not only her video but a few others around there. The idea being that you match a type of coffee to a tarot deck or an oracle deck depending on the characteristics of that coffee. So I'm not a huge coffee drinker, but I am a dedicated coffee drinker. And what I mean by that is I usually only have 1 cup of coffee in the morning, but that happens every single morning without exception. Today I'm obviously having a 2nd cup. It's mid-morning when I'm recording this. And you know, the time when I have my coffee in the morning to me is sacrosanct. My family have learned not to disturb me when, mom has a cup of coffee and I get out my cards and I spend a bit of time before sort of the day starts brewing up. So, to start off with, the very first card, or the very first deck is the Espresso shot. A deck that is strong, punchy, and gets straight to the point. So I've got 2 decks for this. Myself personally, I felt that the decks for the espresso shot had to be small because that is what an espresso shot really is. And the first one, I've got 2 because sometimes you do need that 2nd cup of coffee. The first one is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. So I bought this not just because I loved it, but because I have small hands and this tarot deck makes working with it much more effortless as compared to the bigger size. It is a tarot deck that is certainly strong and punchy. The vibe that it brings to the table is one of, I would say even more than strength, it is one of power. And despite the small size, I always get incredible compliments when I work with this tarot deck or when people see it. I think that Baba Studio have done a brilliant job in creating this deck. I certainly hope that one day in the future they will recreate it again in a small size. I used to have 2, but as you know, some of you might have watched my decluttering video. I've got to trust that 1 deck is enough. And so this is now my only copy. And here is the strength card. I think it's one of their most famous cards that they've created. And to me, this speaks of strength and power and certainly punchy. When I do readings with it, it works really well because it's a Rider-Waite-Smith tradition deck. So in that sense, there is no ambiguity as to the cards and their meanings. So that's the mini version of the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. And my 2nd deck that I have for this first espresso shot coffee is the Visconti Tarot. Again, it's a mini tarot deck. I have carried this around with me quite a while. As you can see, the box is fairly worn. I bought this tarot deck many years ago when I was in Zurich for a week and wandering around the streets as you do in these beautiful European cities. Like it's a pleasure just to walk around and marvel at the architecture. But one day I was wandering around and what would you know it, I came across the witch's shop and her name is Monica. Perfect, right? And this was one of the things that I decided to purchase from there. So it has a bit of an emotional and nostalgic appeal to me. But it's a lovely little tarot deck. I love this deck because the color scheme suits me. A lot of the Marseille type decks, let me show you while I flick through, but usually Marseille type decks or decks that have their minor arcana not illustrated use those primary colors, red, yellow and blue, and for some reason I find that jarring. It just does not sit with me, you know, just having just those three colors. I don't know, I don't like it, okay? You know, we all have our own quirks as readers, and so that's one of mine. And as you can tell, this tarot deck has beautiful golden hues, yellow, gold, and brown, as well as green. And I think that aesthetically, to me, it's very pleasing to the eye. And yeah, it's a tiny deck, so it fits the espresso shot. But more importantly, strong, punchy, and goes straight to the point. And it does all of those things for me, okay? Whenever I have questions that, you know, I feel like I'm only going to ask this once and I need that answer to be solid and strong and powerful, and basically give me the answer and I will take it as it is. I'm not going to beat around the bush with it. It is what it is. This is one of the decks that I reach out for. And I do carry it around with me. Like I said, it's great to fit into my purse and my bag. Doesn't take up a lot of space, but I need to find something a bit more solid to carry it in, because it's starting to get a bit bruised and battered being rattled around. Okay, the next deck is the Drip, a deck that's simple, accessible, and gets the job done. You know, I felt that, like, if you're talking about getting the job done, the Housewife's Tarot is it, right? I don't think you can talk about getting jobs done without thinking about housework. Maybe it's just me, or maybe it's some other thing, I don't know. But this tarot deck, yes, it is certainly accessible. It is still in print. And it's not just accessible because it is in print and you can still get it, but it is accessible because it follows the Rider-Waite-Smith really well. And you know what the cards mean when you see them. There's not a lot of ambiguity or difficulty in understanding what the cards are talking about. So that's my Drip. And it is simple. It's not convoluted. It doesn't have a lot of symbolism, or it's not cluttered. You know, here's the job, gets it done. Perfect for pragmatic type readings where you're talking about everyday questions about life and work and household or family. Lots of martinis going on. So the Housewife's Tarot is an ode to the 1950s and that sort of housewife ethic that a lot of women had in taking pride in their homes and also in their appearance. I think that's the positive of the era. So don't get me wrong, I'm not just going to focus on the positives here, because there is a negative to that side and we all know what that is. I really love the way that it's done. It's got a really great sense of humor, this tarot deck, in it. And artistically, stylistically, it is brilliantly executed. You feel like you're stepping back into the 1950s with it when you see some of these images and when you read with it. So anyway, that is my Drip. Next up, we have the Pour Over, a deck you need to take your time with, but totally worth the effort. So with this one, I'm going to go with one of my main working decks or study decks for this year, and that is the Rose Tarot by Nigel Jackson. There is so much to unpack in this tarot deck. So that's the box it comes in. It's fairly big because it has an excellent guidebook that comes with it as well. And I feel like you certainly need a guidebook with this deck. But when you start working with it for a while, I find that there is a lot of layers within this tarot deck. So it is a blend of Marseille and Rider-Waite-Smith. So we have the Marseille, you know, like the pips, but it also, the minor arcana has a small illustration in the middle that gives you something to work with. But the book explains some of the symbols used in the deck really well. It is not an easy read. it's meaty, you know, it's chewy. You've got something there to really give you something to think about as you read it. It's not lengthy by any means. Like, I think there's like 1 page dedicated to each card, so it's not like you've got to read pages and pages of, you know, ancient history and symbolism and alchemy and magic. But the way that Nigel has written it gives you food for thought, for certain. So if you like Marseille, if you like to have something to take you further beyond like the Rider-Waite-Smith and to give you something to think about and to work with, if you like Hermeticism, I believe it's called, symbolism and alchemy, if you're into all of that, this tarot deck is excellent. I couldn't recommend it enough. The cards shuffle really well. They are very plastic laminated and they are thin, on the thinner side, but they work really well, and therefore they're very durable because of the way that they're laminated. I'm not a huge fan of plastic laminated cards. I think I've said that a million times, but in this deck they work really well because they're not too bulky, you know, they're very flexible. There we go. So anyway, this deck certainly is worth the effort, and you need to take your time with it, and it's worth the effort. And so that is my pour over deck. Up next, the Cafe Latte, a deck that's well received and highly palatable. Cosmic Cycles is it. Can't recommend this deck highly enough for beginners or advanced readers alike. So Cosmic Cycles, you're now able to get it again from the creator, and there are some extra cards that you're able to order as well. It is highly palatable in that I would think that anyone can work with this deck. Anyone can relate to the images within it in one form or another, whether it's in their own life or their friends' lives, of those who know. It's a modern, refreshing tarot deck, and it's easy to understand. It's easy to work with. Excellent for readings, for personal readings, but also for client readings. I think because it is a modern deck and the artist has done such a beautiful job in highlighting some scenes from modern life, many people will find some of these images familiar and somehow comforting as well, I think. So that is my Cafe Latte. I think that it has had a very good reception, this deck, in the tarot community. Lots of people have commended the artist on a brilliant job and on how well executed this tarot deck is. So this deck, the Cosmic Cycles, is my Cafe Latte. Next up we have the Cappuccino, a deck that's classic, sophisticated, and maybe a bit fussy. So I had to think about this, and in the end I ended up settling for the Aquarian Tarot. I think that this deck is classic and sophisticated because the artwork reminds me of the Art Nouveau in a way, and also reminds me of really nicely done and polished artistic applications in life, whether it be through architecture or you know, just the forms in the deck. I just think that yeah, to me it's a classy deck. I think that the figures are classy in the way that they're represented and shown, and the clothes that they're wearing, and I think that sophistication is part of it. And I know some people might not agree, but you know, that's the beauty of tarot. I mean, if you were to ask me what's a classic and sophisticated high priestess in the tarot deck, well, I'd go for her for sure, you know. So it's a bit fussy because of the cardstock. I find the cardstock, so it's a little bit like the Rose Tarot in terms of that it is thinner and it is plastic laminated, but for some reason with this one it seems to jump out of my hands a bit more. And so I did think that it's it's a little bit fussy because of that. So this is the Cappuccino, classic, sophisticated, and maybe a bit fussy. I mean, look at that. That is class right there. I would totally wear that if I could find something like that in an op shop somewhere. That would be me. So yeah, anyway, that is the Aquarian Tarot. And next we have the Mocha, a deck that's rich, indulgent, and a bit extra. And I think I went with, yes, the Victorian Romantic, because if you're talking about rich and a bit extra, you can't go past the Victorian Romantic. Either I've got the 2nd edition and I've got the 4th edition. I'm going to use the 4th edition here. The 2nd edition also would fit the bill because it has the gilded edges in gold. The 4th edition has the gold. Don't know if the lighting will pick that up, but that's got like a sort of like a gold leaf, sort of a applique. I don't know how you'd say it, but yeah, it's rich and indulgent, no doubt. So that to me is rich. Absolutely, 100%. I don't think there are any decks out there that come anywhere close to the Victorian Romantic decks. Certainly their very last revisions of the Victorian Romantic, but also the Tarot of Prague and also the Fantastic Menagerie. Their work has just been incredible in what they've done with their decks. And right down to the cardstock, which in this deck I call it the sexy cardstock. It has an incredible feel that no other publisher has captured to this extent. So shuffling these decks feels like a sensual, rich experience to me. It's absolutely beautiful. And it's a brilliant reading deck. That's the most fantastic thing about it, is that I've read with this deck for clients and of course particular to relationship questions, and it reads like a dream. For pragmatic questions that pertain to relationships, this would be like my #1 go-to tarot deck for that. So this is the 4th edition of the Victorian Romantic, and it fits the Mocha coffee type really well in my opinion. Next up I have the Chai Latte, a deck that's warm, cozy, and nurturing. And really, if we're talking about warm and cozy, can't really go past the Herb Crafter's Tarot. I've seen other YouTube channels pick this one up to go with the warm and cozy and nurturing. And I've talked about this tarot deck a few times before. It is one of the decks that I'm working with this year and that I'm studying a bit more in depth. Nurturing and cozy are, it's like the epitome of this deck. You know, it's what this deck is all about. Not just because it's herbs by themselves, but it's the setting within which these herbs are placed. Okay, and we're going to see that through some of these cards, beautifully illustrated. It's nurturing. It's like being in your grandma's house, you know, as she's brewing up chicken soup. And everything there is homemade. And it might be old, but it's well cared for with tenderness and love. When I read with this tarot deck, when I work with it, I feel like I'm stepping back in time a little bit. And I'm not one of those people to say that to live a simpler life, means that we'll go back to living like peasants in the 1600s. Not at all. But I find myself over and over decluttering my life of unnecessary chaos and the things that are cheap and tacky and plasticky. And that started to me in my kitchen, first of all. I'm a big fan of cast iron and glass jars and, you know, doing with plastic as little as possible, okay? Wicker baskets. So I'm still able to enjoy life and to make the most of it. It's not like I'm feeling deprived when I remove lots of superfluous things that I don't need, really. I just sort of wanted them and then realized that, yeah, in the long run, they're just burden me. It's not that. So anyway, what I'm trying to say really is that, yeah, this is my chai latte. It's the deck that's warm, cozy, and nurturing for me. And it's been that way for many years since I purchased it, basically. I bonded with it instantly. I recommend it to herbalists, anyone working with herbs, anyone wishing to simplify their life and tap into, you know, the real magic of a simpler life. This is it. Okay. Next up, I have the Matcha Latte, a deck that's an acquired taste or a bit unconventional. So, this one is the New Immortals by Madeleine McLaughlin, and I got this, I think, last year or the year before. It is certainly an acquired taste. I know a lot of people won't appreciate the collage, and I have to say I'm not a collage art person, at least not on my tarot decks, but this deck, yeah, it works. And I really love the way that she's done the, how she sort of superimposed all these sort of differing images to come up with something cohesive, and that works. So as you can tell, it's certainly different. In the minor arcana, you often have animals across the 4 elements. And for that reason, or one of the reasons, I wouldn't recommend it to a beginner. Okay, so it is an acquired taste. It is unconventional in the tarot world in the way that she's done her images, but they work brilliantly. I've done, was it on, I can't remember if I did a video or a blog post. My memory is a bit shocking sometimes. On working with this deck for a business spread that I was looking at, and demonstrated how it works really, really well. It is diverse. I find that a lot of the sword suit has Indian culture, images from the Indian cultures in it. But yeah, overall, it's a really interesting deck. Took me a little while to warm up to it. It has a really nice linen cardstock, so you can read with it, shuffle with it beautifully, and I'd say give it a go. If you want something different, something that will take you out of your comfort zone, then this is one of the decks I'd certainly recommend for people to read with. Okay, so this is the New Immortals by Madeleine McLaughlin. I think you can purchase this from the artist's website. If you Google that up, you should have no trouble coming across it. Next up is the Hot Chocolate, a deck that speaks to a younger version of yourself. And I had to do it. There was only one deck that came straight to mind, and that is the Vanessa Tarot. It is almost exclusively a feminine deck. I think there is one card where there is one male in it. And the characters are young and sassy and bold, and you know, they're out there enjoying life, and they reminded me of me in my 20s. You know, when you've got your professional job and you're free to use the money as you wish and to blow it on whatever you wish, and life is, you know, life's a party. The world is a party to be explored, at least it was for me. And so this tarot deck has that really young vibe about it, of young women out exploring, trying different things, and especially for my generation. So I'm 43 almost. Oh my goodness. But I still feel sometimes like this was me catching up with friends in a cafe over a cup of coffee or maybe a beer. And they've got a zest for life, these girls in here. And that reminds me of myself. You know, my 20s, I had some very painful moments in my 20s, don't get me wrong. But I also spent a lot of time enjoying the benefits of living in a Western country where you have the benefits of an education and a good income to explore life and to enjoy it. Okay, and that's what this tarot deck to me personally reminds me of. Okay, it's a really, really wonderful little deck. I love the card size, I love the card stock. It comes in a tin so you can carry it around, and this is the only card that has a male in it, is the Devil. All the other cards have female protagonists in it, and you know, it shows them in different settings, right down to working unconventional jobs as well. I actually did do a welding course when I was in my 20s. It was part of my engineering degree, and we had to do, you know, like practical type workshops, it was my favorite out of all the practical type things that I had to do. Welding was actually something that I really, really enjoyed, and I would say I was pretty good at it, but you know, that's just my my impression. So anyway, that is the hot chocolate for the young version of myself, and it is the Vanessa Tarot by Linear Narciso. So next up we have the Herbal Tea, a deck that takes things down a notch or helps you unwind. And for that, I can't use the Herb Crafters twice. Well, I think you can, there are no rules, but I felt like I should really try and find something else. And one deck that I haven't seen come up a lot in the Tarot Tube community is Tarot of the Spirit. It is an older tarot deck published by US Games, and it is created by a mother-daughter duo, Pamela Eakins and Joyce Eakins. One is the scribe and one is the painter. And this is indeed a deck that I get out when I feel like I just need a bit of contemplation and solitude, okay? It's not a deck that I would use for client readings. I don't think I've ever used this for a client, and you can see why. It is like a modern art type deck, and it does have keywords at the bottom, which I'm not usually a fan of, but I think they do work with this tarot deck. As you can tell from the artwork, this deck invites a bit of stillness and taking the time out from the busyness of life, taking time out for yourself. You know, just spend some time in contemplation. Because it doesn't show people doing stuff as such, it really evokes that energy. So, okay, you do have in some cards, you know, human characters in it, but easily, you know, 80% of this deck is the sort of I'd call it, I guess, modern art images and symbolism, where I like to get my cup of tea out and spend some time with it and ask questions relating to inner work, really. Not so much about being out there in the world, but it's about my inner self, my inner world, and my self-development. Okay, so this is my herbal tea deck. It certainly takes things down a notch for me, and I really appreciate the energy that it brings to a table, being more of a calmer, zen-like, a slower pace, basically. Okay, and some of the colors in this deck are so beautiful. So yeah, the queens are mothers and the kings are fathers. they have renamed some of the cards, but yeah, it works really well. Obviously not a beginner's deck, but it is a really, really good deck. And the thing is, if you're thinking about this deck, that, you know, yeah, it's nice, but I'd get stuck with interpreting it, well, it does have, let me put this aside, because it does have a substantial book that comes with it, and it's like, how many pages is it? I think it's about 400 something pages, yeah. And there's so much in it to unpack. Like, if you really want to go deep with the tarot deck and also work with what the artist you know, had in mind and what their interpretation is, you've got a divinatory meaning, you've got a meditation for the cards, esoteric qualities, and then there's the interpretation. So there is a lot to unpack in this deck, and the minor arcana as well. All the minor arcana do have a divinatory meaning and the meditation and interpretation as well, and card symbolism. So yes, if you do think about getting this deck, then I would highly recommend you obtain it with the book. So that wraps up my video response to Kay. Thank you so much, Kay, for creating such a fun hashtag. I've certainly really enjoyed watching not just your video, but other responses out there from the world of TarotTube, and it's really fun and interesting to watch them. And what I find interesting is that so many people will have different decks for, you know, the different prompts, but they all work really well, and you can see the justification and the choices that people make in their decision making, and how they relate to you know, the particular coffee type, and they all work. They're all different, but they all work. So I find that absolutely fascinating and really enjoyable to watch. So for now, I'm gonna wrap it up here. I, as always, thank everyone for watching, and thank you so much for supporting my channel. Until we meet next time, take care.